My name is Isabella McLean, and I'm 31 years old. Looking back now, it's almost surreal how one smug sentence managed to unravel 3 years of loyalty, sacrifice, and quiet devotion. But at the same time, it freed me in ways I didn't even know I needed. This is long, but if you've ever been compared to someone who came before you, if you've ever felt like the safe option while someone else lingered in the shadows, maybe this will resonate. Names are changed, obviously. Let's call my boyfriend Stanley and his ex-girlfriend Lena. Stanley and I had been together for just over 3 years. We met at a mutual friend's backyard barbecue when we were both grinding through entry-level jobs, pretending we knew where our lives were headed. He was charming in a quiet way, warm smile, easy laugh, the kind of man who seemed grounded. I was drawn to that. I'd spent most of my 20s around unpredictability. Stability felt like relief. From the beginning, I was all in. When Stanley lost his job 6 months into our relationship budget cuts at his startup, I didn't hesitate. I picked up extra shifts, covered rent-cooked meals when he barely had the energy to get out of bed. I sat with him at night while he spiraled, doubting his worth, his future. I edited his resume, rehearsed interview answers with him, reassured him until my voice went hoarse. When he finally landed a better position 2 hours away, I was the one who suggested we move. I transferred offices, left my closest friends, packed up my life without resentment because I believed we were building something together. There were moments that made it feel worth it. One night after a brutal interview rejection, he came home defeated. I'd set up his favorite takeout candles, a quiet evening just for us. He wrapped his arms around me and whispered, "You're my anchor." I held on to that sentence for far longer than I should have. I postponed a certification that could have boosted my career because I didn't want to be unavailable during his transition. I skipped trip celebrations opportunities. I told myself this was what partnership looked like, but cracks started forming thin at first, easy to ignore. Stanley talked about Lena casually in the beginning. Little things. Lena used to love spontaneous road trips. Lena would have laughed at that. Always said with a nostalgic smile, never overtly cruel. I brushed it off. Everyone has a past, I told myself. She was the wild one from his college days. Tattoos, chaos, passion. They broke up because she cheated more than once, but he spoke about her like she was a legend. Over time, the comparisons sharpened. If I suggested budgeting after our move strained finances, he'd scoff. Lena never worried about money. She lived in the moment. If I planned a quiet date night, he'd sigh, "You're so predictable." Lena would have surprised me with concert tickets. Each comment landed like a pinprick. Small, manageable, or so I thought. I tried harder, planned trips, bought thoughtful gifts, bent myself into whatever shape I thought he wanted, but the distance grew anyway. Late nights at work events, phone glued to his hand, laughing at texts he refused to explain. He told me I was paranoid, that I was imagining things. I believed him because believing him was easier than admitting the truth. Looking back now, I see the manipulation clearly. He kept me as the stable foundation while emotionally orbiting someone else. I was the safe place he could always return to. The breaking point came on a random Tuesday night. I'd worked late, exhausted, hoping for peace. Dinner half-cooked, apartment quiet. Stanley came in already irritated, snapping about a text I hadn't answered fast enough. It escalated over something trivial, dry cleaning, I think. And then he said it. "You're always stuck in your safe little routines," he sneered. Lena would have dropped everything for me. I asked him calmly if we could stop bringing her into our arguments. That's when he laughed. Cold, smug. Why, he said, "You're not competing with her. You already lost." Something inside me went still. I didn't scream. I didn't argue. I stood up, walked into the bedroom, and began packing. Methodical. Shirts, pants, toiletries. Behind me, confusion replaced smugness. "What are you doing?" he asked. I zipped my bag halfway and answered evenly, "Letting the winner have you." And with that, everything changed. I left the apartment that night with nothing but a duffel bag and a clarity that felt almost unnatural, like stepping into cold air after being suffocated for too long. The city lights blurred as I drove my hands steady on the wheel, my mind replaying his words over and over. "You already lost." Not shouted, not said in anger. Delivered like a fact he'd been sitting on for months, maybe years. That was what hurt most, not the comparison itself, but the certainty behind it. As if in his mind the outcome had always been decided, and I was just too foolish to notice. I checked into a cheap hotel near the highway, the kind with buzzing fluorescent lights and walls so thin you could hear strangers coughing through them. I sat on the edge of the bed bag at my feet, staring at the blank wall, and finally let myself feel it. Not heartbreak exactly, something sharper. Betrayal mixed with humiliation. I wasn't blindsided. I'd been slowly carved down, piece by piece, and convinced myself it was normal. Sleep came in fragments. Every time I drifted off, I heard his laugh again. The next morning, I didn't call him. I didn't text. I didn't wait for an apology that would never really be one. Instead, I called my manager and requested a transfer back to my old office in the city we'd left. It was approved faster than I expected, like the universe had been waiting for me to finally choose myself. I crashed on my friend Daniel Carter's couch for a few weeks, surrounded by the life I'd put on hold. Familiar streets, familiar faces, a version of myself I almost didn't recognize anymore. The silence was the hardest part at first. I'd wake up instinctively reaching for my phone, expecting a good morning message or a passive-aggressive text, pretending nothing had happened. There was nothing. I blocked Stanley everywhere: his number, social media, email. I didn't want updates. I didn't want explanations. I needed the space to breathe without his voice in my head, telling me who I was supposed to be. As the days passed, clarity replaced confusion. I started noticing things I'd ignored for years. How often I'd apologize just to keep the peace. How many times I'd swallowed discomfort because I didn't want to seem insecure. How I'd rewritten his dismissiveness as stress, his cruelty as honesty. The comparisons weren't accidents. They were tools. Each mention of Lena wasn't nostalgia, it was leverage, a way to keep me off balance, always proving, always trying. I went back to the gym, not out of revenge, not to glow up for anyone, but because it grounded me. I re-enrolled in the certification course I'd postponed, finished it in weeks, and realized I was good. Really good at what I did. Work felt lighter, without the constant undercurrent of emotional anxiety. Friends noticed the shift before I did. They said I looked calmer, straighter, like I wasn't shrinking anymore. About a month in, the updates started coming without me asking. Mutual friends mentioned that Stanley had reconnected with Lena almost immediately. Pictures went up online, dim bars, forced smiles, captions dripping with performative happiness. I felt nothing. No jealousy, just confirmation. What unraveled next came quickly. Lena was still Lena, volatile, jealous, unpredictable. Arguments escalated. Doors slammed. One night, from what I heard, she smashed his phone during a fight and disappeared for days. Then she cheated. Again. The same pattern that had ended them the first time. Watching it from a distance was surreal. The chaos he'd romanticized swallowed him whole. His job performance slipped. Deadlines missed. A warning from management. Friends who once defended him grew quiet. The stability he'd mocked in me was suddenly gone, and he didn't know how to function without it. I didn't gloat. I didn't feel satisfaction. Mostly I felt relieved that I wasn't there to absorb the fallout. That relief turned into resolve when the first message came through from an unknown number. "Hey, it's Stanley. Can we talk?" I stared at the screen for a moment, waiting to feel something. Anger, sadness, vindication. There was nothing. I deleted it without replying. A week later, another message. Longer, apologetic, framed as mutual misunderstanding. Still nothing. Then came the calls from his sister, from a friend I barely knew, each one telling me he was struggling and that I should be the bigger person. That was when I understood the full shift in power. I wasn't the one chasing closure. I wasn't begging to be chosen. I wasn't waiting to be validated. He was unraveling because the safety net he'd dismissed had disappeared. And for the first time, I didn't feel obligated to catch him. I had been the steady one, the anchor, the backup plan, and I was done being any of it. The thing about walking away quietly is that people always expect you to come back louder. I didn't. Weeks passed, and the silence hardened into something solid and protective. My days filled themselves naturally. Work the gym dinners with friends I'd neglected for years. I stopped checking my phone compulsively, stopped bracing myself for disappointment. I slept through the night for the first time in a long time. The constant low-level anxiety I'd lived with, wondering if I was enough, if I was exciting enough, if I was losing some invisible competition, evaporated. And that's when Stanley escalated. It started with apologies that weren't really apologies. Messages forwarded through mutual friends. He says he didn't mean it like that. He was just angry. He didn't realize how much it hurt you. I recognized the language instantly. Minimize, reframe, redirect. The same tactics he'd used whenever I tried to address something uncomfortable in our relationship. Then came the guilt. His sister called one evening while I was cooking dinner. I almost didn't answer, but something in me wanted to hear how this version of the story was being told. "Isabella," she said, voice tight with concern. "Stanley's not doing well. He's barely sleeping. He says he made a mistake. You know he didn't mean those things about Lena." I let the silence stretch before replying. "He meant them enough to say them. You know how he gets when he's stressed," she pressed. "He needs you. You've always been the one who keeps him grounded." There it was, the expectation that I would resume my role as emotional regulator simply because I'd always done it before. "I'm not his anchor anymore," I said calmly, "and I don't owe him that." She sighed, frustrated. "You're being cold." "No," I corrected. "I'm being consistent." I hung up before she could respond. A few days later, he tried himself. A voicemail this time. His voice sounded thinner, strained, like someone rehearsing remorse without fully understanding it. "Bella, please pick up. I was wrong. I see that now. Lena was a mistake. She always was. Things got confusing. I didn't mean to hurt you. You know me. You know my heart." I listened once, just once. Then I deleted it. Because the problem wasn't that he'd been confused. The problem was that he'd been clear enough to look me in the eye and tell me I'd already lost. That sentence hadn't slipped out accidentally. It had lived in him, waiting for the right moment to be used. The universe, apparently satisfied that I'd learned the lesson, decided to test my resolve one last time. It was a Saturday afternoon when my doorbell rang. I'd just finished unpacking the last box in my new apartment, a small, sunlit, one-bedroom overlooking a park. My space, my peace. I checked the peephole and felt my stomach drop. Stanley stood there, hair unkempt, eyes, rimmed red shoulders slumped in a way I'd never seen before. This wasn't the confident man who'd once smirked through our arguments. This was someone undone. I opened the door just enough to speak. "What are you doing here?" I asked. Relief flooded his face like he'd been holding his breath for weeks. "Thank God. Bella, please, just let me in. We need to talk." "No," I said evenly. "We don't." His voice cracked. "She ruined everything. Lena, she cheated. She used me. She's unstable. I should have listened to you. I was stupid. I was angry. I didn't mean what I said." I leaned against the doorframe, calm, in a way that seemed to unnerve him. "Which part?" He blinked. "What? The part where you compared me to her, or the part where you told me I'd already lost?" Tears welled in his eyes. I was lashing out. I didn't mean it like that. "But you said it," I replied, "and words like that don't come from nowhere. They come from beliefs you've been feeding for a long time." He reached out, desperation sharpening his voice. "Please don't throw us away over one argument." I met his gaze without flinching. Us was thrown away before that night. I just finally noticed. His expression shifted, then hurt, giving way to frustration. "So that's it? You're just done?" "Yes." I closed the door, gently locked it, and stood there listening as he knocked once, twice, then stopped. His footsteps faded down the hall. No shouting, no dramatic scene, just the sound of someone realizing the safety net was gone. I didn't feel victorious. I felt free. After Stanley left my doorstep that afternoon, something settled permanently inside me. Not anger, not sadness, finality. The kind that doesn't announce itself loudly, but locks into place with quiet certainty. I didn't replay the conversation. I didn't second-guess my tone or wonder if I'd been too harsh. For the first time in years, I trusted my own judgment without needing it validated. Life didn't magically become perfect overnight, but it became mine again. My mornings stopped starting with tension. I'd wake up, make coffee, sit by the window, overlooking the park, and plan my day without factoring in anyone else's moods or expectations. I realized how much mental space Stanley had occupied, how often I'd shaped my schedule, my energy, even my words around keeping him comfortable. That constant adjustment was gone, and the relief was almost physical. Work flourished. The certification I'd finally completed led to bigger projects, then a promotion I hadn't even applied for because I didn't think I was ready before. Turns out I'd always been ready. I'd just been shrinking myself to make room for someone else's instability. Colleagues started trusting me with leadership roles. I traveled for conferences. I spoke up in meetings without apologizing first. At the gym, my strength returned faster than I expected. Not just physical strength, but the kind that comes from knowing you're no longer carrying dead weight. Friends commented on it casually, how different I seemed, how grounded. I laughed more. I listened better. I wasn't distracted by a phone buzzing with messages that made my stomach knot. Meanwhile, the fallout on Stanley's side intensified. I didn't go looking for updates, but they found me anyway. Mutual friends filled in the gaps during casual conversations, their tones shifting from neutral to uncomfortable. Stanley and Lena's reunion had imploded faster than anyone predicted. Her volatility escalated. His temper followed. They fed off each other's chaos until there was nothing left but damage. One night turned physical shouting, broken objects, neighbors involved. After that, she vanished, taking money he'd lent her and leaving him to explain the mess to his landlord. His job suffered next. Missed deadlines, distracted meetings, a demotion that stripped him of the confidence he'd always worn like armor. Friends who once excused his behavior started pulling away. Apparently, without someone steady absorbing the impact, his rough edges cut everyone around him. Then came the renewed attempts to reach me. The messages shifted in tone from apologetic to resentful. You're really going to ignore me forever after everything we went through. When that didn't work, the guilt returned, dressed up as concern. His mother emailed me a long message about loyalty and forgiveness, about how families chosen or otherwise don't abandon each other. I archived it without replying. What struck me most wasn't the desperation itself, but the pattern. Every plea centered on his suffering, his loneliness, his regret. Not once did he ask how I was. Not once did he acknowledge the damage he'd caused without immediately redirecting the focus back to himself. That realization closed the last crack of doubt. I wasn't cruel for walking away. I was simply no longer willing to be collateral damage in someone else's unresolved chaos. A few months after the breakup, I started dating again. Not seriously at first, just cautiously opening the door I'd kept shut for so long. That's when I met Noah Reynolds at a professional networking event. No drama, no intensity masquerading as passion, just easy conversation, mutual respect, and an absence of tension that felt almost unfamiliar at first. Being with someone who didn't compare me to their past was eye-opening. Someone who didn't need me to prove my worth through sacrifice. With Noah, there was no competition, no shadow hovering in the background. Just presence. That's when it fully clicked. The power had shifted the moment I walked out that door with my duffel bag. I just hadn't seen it yet. Stanley thought I'd lost because I'd stopped fighting for him. In reality, I'd won the second I stopped competing. By the time Stanley reached out again, I barely recognized the version of myself he was trying to appeal to. It started quietly in email this time, longer than the others, written in that careful, almost formal tone people use when they're trying to sound accountable without fully owning anything. He admitted Lena had been a mistake. He admitted he'd taken me for granted. He admitted he'd spoken out of frustration. What he didn't admit was intent. What he didn't admit was that the cruelty had been deliberate. That smug sentence hadn't been heat-of-the-moment rage, it had been the truth slipping out. I read the email once, felt a faint echo of something that might have been sadness months ago, and closed it. No response. Silence had become my boundary, and it was holding firm. That silence drove him further. Mutual friends began reaching out one by one, always prefaced with awkward small talk, always leading to the same request. He's really struggling. He's not himself. He knows he messed up. Each time I thanked them for caring and declined to engage. Some understood, some didn't. A few accused me of being cold, unforgiving, dramatic. I let them think whatever they needed to think. I'd spent too long explaining myself to people committed to misunderstanding me. What they didn't see, what Stanley didn't see, was how steady my life had become. Work had momentum now. My calendar filled with things I chose, not obligations I resented. Evenings were calm. Weekends stretched open instead of feeling like emotional recovery periods. With Noah, there was no guessing game, no wondering where I stood, no comparisons to ghosts from the past. He listened. He showed up. He didn't need me to fix him. Meanwhile, Stanley's situation continued to deteriorate. The details trickled in reluctantly, like people were embarrassed to even say them out loud. He'd tried to move apartments, but couldn't afford the rent alone. He'd picked fights with friends who questioned his choices. He oscillated between self-pity and anger, blaming everyone but himself for how things had turned out. The stability he'd once mocked, the routines, the predictability, the quiet was suddenly what he was begging for, and he wanted it back from me. The final escalation came late one evening, when my phone lit up with a voicemail notification from an unfamiliar number. I almost deleted it without listening, but curiosity got the better of me. His voice was raw this time, stripped of charm, stripped of confidence. "I get it now," he said. "I was stupid. I thought excitement meant happiness. I thought stability was boring. I see what I lost. Please, I need you. I can't do this alone. Need, not love, not respect. Need. That word sealed it. Because needing someone isn't the same as choosing them. And I refused to be someone's safety net ever again, especially for the person who'd looked me in the eye and told me I'd already lost. I deleted the voicemail. The anger came afterward, not explosive, not overwhelming, but sharp and clarifying. I realized how close I'd come to disappearing into someone else's narrative, how easily I could have stayed and kept shrinking if I hadn't finally listened to the part of myself that knew better. Stanley wasn't sorry he'd hurt me. He was sorry the consequences had landed. And consequences always land eventually. I didn't wish him harm. I didn't celebrate his downfall. I simply stepped out of the way and let reality do what it always does when illusions collapse. He thought walking away meant I was giving up. In truth, it was the moment I stopped accepting less than I deserved. 5 months after I walked out with that duffel bag, I ran into Stanley for the last time, though I didn't know it the moment I walked in. It was Daniel Carter's birthday, a small gathering on a rooftop bar overlooking the city skyline. Warm lights, low music, familiar faces. Daniel had checked with me beforehand, promised Stanley wouldn't be there. I trusted him. I also trusted myself enough now to know that even if he was, it wouldn't undo me. I arrived with Noah Reynolds, his hand warm and steady in mine. Nothing performative. No need to prove anything. I was relaxed, laughing easily, feeling present in a way I hadn't in years. Then I saw Stanley. He stood near the bar, drink in hand, shoulders slumped, eyes scanning the room like he was already on edge. He looked smaller. Not physically, but energetically. The confidence he once wore so casually was gone, replaced by a brittle tension. His hair was unkempt, dark circles carved under his eyes. When our gazes met, his expression froze, then shifted, shock relief, something dangerously close to hope. He moved toward me before I could react. "Isabella," he said, voice unsteady, "I didn't expect you to be here." I nodded politely, my arm still around Noah. "Stanley." His eyes flicked to Noah, then back to me. "Can we talk privately?" "No," I said calmly. "There's no need." That answer cracked something in him. "Please," he said, lowering his voice. "Just a minute. I need you to hear me out." He didn't want me to hear him out. He wanted absolution, a rewrite. Permission to believe none of it really counted. "I already have," I replied. His words tumbled out anyway, faster now, desperate. Lena had been abusive, he said. Yelling, throwing things, using him for money, cheating. He'd lost his promotion. Friends had distanced themselves. His family blamed him for everything falling apart. "But you," he said, eyes shining. "You were right. You were always right. You were stable, kind. I see that now." Need again, disguised as insight. "I need that back," he finished quietly. I studied him for a moment, not with anger, not with sadness, but with clarity. Then I spoke, my voice steady enough that even I felt its weight. "Do you remember what you said during our last argument?" His face tightened. "Bella, you told me I wasn't competing with her," I continued. "You told me I'd already lost." A few people nearby had gone quiet, the tension rippling outward. "That was your justification," I said. "Your excuse for keeping me as a backup while you chased chaos. You decided the outcome without giving me a say." Tears welled in his eyes. "I didn't mean it. I was angry, confused." "No," I replied. "You were honest." I gestured gently to the space around us, to Noah beside me, to the city lights, to the calm hum of a life I'd rebuilt. "This is what winning looks like to me now. Peace, respect, stability. You called it boring once." His voice shook. "So that's it. You just upgraded and left me behind." I shrugged, not cruelly, truthfully. I didn't upgrade. I stopped settling. For a moment, something ugly flashed across his face. Envy, resentment, wounded pride. "You're heartless," he muttered, "parading your happiness while I'm falling apart." "No," I said quietly. "I'm just not responsible for you anymore." I turned away then, guiding Noah back toward our friends. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. When I glanced over my shoulder, later, Stanley was gone. And for the first time, I felt nothing at all. The night after Daniel's birthday party, I slept deeper than I had in years. No replaying conversations, no imagining alternative endings, no wondering if I'd been too harsh or not harsh enough. Just rest, the kind that comes when something finally closes for good. I woke up the next morning with sunlight spilling across the bedroom floor and a quiet certainty in my chest that surprised me with its calm. The story I'd been carrying about losing, about being replaced, about not being enough was finished. Not rewritten. Finished. For a long time after the breakup, I'd thought closure would feel dramatic, emotional, like a final argument or a grand realization. But closure, it turns out, feels ordinary. It feels like making coffee without your hand shaking. It feels like planning a weekend without checking someone else's mood first. It feels like not flinching when a name crosses your mind. Stanley stopped trying after that night. No more emails. No more voicemails from unknown numbers. No more messages passed through friends who were just checking in. I didn't block anything new. There was nothing left to block. His silence wasn't something I celebrated, but it confirmed what I already knew. He'd finally understood that there was no door left open, no crack to wedge himself into with apologies and need. Life kept moving forward steadily and unapologetically. Work continued to expand in ways I hadn't imagined when I was bending my future around someone else's instability. I led projects. I traveled. I spoke with confidence that came from knowing I hadn't betrayed myself to get there. People listened, not because I was louder, but because I was sure of myself. With Noah Reynolds, things unfolded without urgency or pressure. No emotional roller coasters, no comparisons to people who came before. We talked openly. We laughed easily. We planned things without fear that they'd be used as leverage later. Being with him didn't feel like proving my worth, it felt like sharing it. Sometimes in quiet moments I thought back to that argument, to the way Stanley had smirked when he said, "You already lost." For a while that sentence haunted me. It echoed in my head during long drives, quiet nights, moments of doubt. But eventually it lost its power. Not because I fought it, but because I understood it. He thought losing meant leaving. He thought winning meant being chosen at any cost. What he never understood was that the real loss wasn't walking away, it was staying somewhere you're only valued as a fallback. The real defeat is shrinking yourself to keep someone else comfortable. The real mistake is believing that stability is weakness and chaos is passion. I didn't lose that night. I chose myself, and that choice changed everything. Thanks for listening to my story. If you've ever been told you weren't enough or made to feel like you were competing with a past that wouldn't stay buried, remember this.